Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to do our best to record what happens here today. Whether that attempt is successful will be successful is anybody's guess. The technology staff, of course, are enjoying their day off, and so I'm videoing myself on my daughter's video camera. She, thank God, knows how to download videos, upload, download, whatever kind of load you're supposed to do with them. And once I get this back home, she will do whatever that kind of loading is to wherever it goes that one does that kind of loading. And after that, I think I may actually be able to take over and post this stuff to files to go via LSU. But if that proves impossible, my daughters can then upload the film to YouTube and it can be viewed from there. All right. A couple of administrative matters. First of all, everyone has received the exam summary, I trust. Splendid. If you did not, please see me, because that means there is a serious email problem between you and me. You should have gotten it yesterday evening about 5:30, 6 o'clock. The video recording of the last class session has brought to my attention. Leaves the viewer to wonder about many of the calculations that were performed in the last three problems, the reduction exercises. I'm therefore going to write up the solutions and then send them to you in a PDF document via Moodle for your edification and amusement. All right. Well, what are we going to do here today? Since I've already given you in writing the exam summary, we won't be going over that again. I'm here simply to answer your questions, and if it is your pleasure, to work some reduction problems. Perhaps I can start with this question, which is a favorite one of many students. How are reduction and collation related to each other? Let me look straight in the camera here and say, first thing you need to understand about this question is whatever the hell the answer to it is, it's of no concern to yours on this exam. Why? Because I keep them separate. I ask the collation stuff over here where there's no reduction going on, and I ask the reduction questions over here where there's no collation going on. Why do I do that? Because the relationship between collation and reduction is unclear. I'm talking about unclear as a matter of law. There is no legislation that tells us in any given case where one and the same potential demander of collation and demander of reduction, what he's got to do first. And depending on which one he does first, the outcome of the other one will be very different. If you collate first, then the reduction will be dramatically reduced. If you reduce first, then the forced error, in addition to getting all the stuff that he wants that way, can even the score with his siblings afterward, and he'll end up with a heck of a lot more at the end of the day, at least a disadvantaged child would, than he would if you did the two in the other order. Now, because there's no legislation to tell you whether you've got to do collation first or reduction first, how we handle it's become a matter of custom. In France, the custom is well established. It's in all the scholarship. You reduce first and then you collate. But I have reason to believe that the practice here in Louisiana is precisely to the contrary. If I remember Warren Mingus correctly, and I believe that his son Joe, who's practicing the same kind of law that Warren did, successions, among other things. If I understand them correctly, the normal order of procedure here in Louisiana is to collate first and then reduce. So I have never known what the answer to the question is. Do you reduce first or collate first? I mean, is it the option? One answer would be it's the option of the forced error. He can do what he wants, right? He can choose one, or he can choose to do one and not the other. He can choose to do the other and not the first. He can choose to do both of them, but one before the other, or the other before the first. That's a possibility. It's also possible, though, there's a firm customary rule that you've got to do one instead of the other, or one before the other if you're going to do both. But I don't know what it is, and it's not for want of trying. This is one of those many points in teaching Louisiana civil law where I wish I were in France, because there at least I'd have an answer, even if I didn't like it. So, again, let's understand then when you get to you encounter collation questions on the exam, you're not going to be dealing with reduction. And when you encounter reduction questions on the exam, you're not going to be dealing with collation. So I'm not going to ask you to answer a question I can't answer myself. What if you encounter that on the bar exam? Do the best you can, and then find the bar examiner who wrote the problem and go whip his ass, because it's really an unfair thing to do. Okay? Now, what about your questions? Not everybody at once. Ms. Juneau?
Okay, for forced heirship, we have what's called quasi-representation for unworthiness and renunciation. My question is, for the other ways that you disinherit someone, can you use quasi-representation?
Okay, so you say we have this thing called quasi-representation in cases of declaration of unworthiness and renunciation, and your question is?
There's several ways you can disinherit someone for forced heirship.
Correct.
Do you ever have representation, like, we talked about representation under forced heirship when they predecease, we have like regular representation.
That's correct.
But if it's just like, if a grandfather disinherits their child, and then can the father's child, they don't represent, we didn't talk about that, did we?
We did not talk about that. We did not talk about quasi-representation in the case of disinheritance. Does that mean that it doesn't happen? No. It just means we didn't talk about it. And the reason we didn't talk about it is because, again, really, I don't know anything. I mean, what I don't know about the law of successions, now the course is over, your evaluation's in, I can tell you the truth. I don't care if you know the truth. What I don't know could fill an ocean. And this is another one. I don't know whether we have quasi-representation going on in the case of disinheritance. I don't think so. But I don't know for sure, so I don't talk about it. There are all kinds of things I avoided talking about simply because I don't know what the answer is. And this is one of them on the list of a million. But I can guarantee you that on your exam, you're not going to have to worry about quasi-representation of disinherited forced heirs. Yes, sir?
On your website, you have two exams, I think it was 2001 and 2005, with the entities. Should we be aware, or do we need to be aware of any changes in the law that might confuse us as we're assessing those two exams?
That's an excellent question. For those of you who couldn't hear Mr. Scandrett, those of you who will be watching this on YouTube, Mr. Scandrett asked a question about changes in the law since the time of the exams that I've posted on my website, giving them to you as models to study, 2001 and 2005 exam. I'll have to think about that for a second, Mr. Scandrett. Let's see. The only significant changes in the law of successions or donations that have taken place since then that I'm aware of, or at least that we talked about, there are some others we didn't talk about, but that we talked about, is the revision of the law of donations inter vivos. That's the big one. Of course, there have been revisions in the law of filiation that may well have an impact upon who is considered to be whose child, and then whether or not, once there's been filiation of an illegitimate child, the parent can inherit from the child, or the child can inherit from the parent. So I'm thinking off the top of my head here, but let me talk about the filiation. That is one thing that certainly has changed. Back in 2001, when I wrote that exam, this was really weird, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is a rule that never made any sense to me. But if the father formally acknowledged his illegitimate child, actually it wasn't formal acknowledgement, I take that back. It was informal acknowledgement, which we don't even have anymore. But here was the rule. If the father informally acknowledged his child, the father could inherit from the child, but the child couldn't inherit from the father. Well, it isn't that way anymore, right? Now the law is, again, formal acknowledgement we don't even recognize that anymore, certainly not to the extent in the way that we used to, as an independent mode of filiating illegitimate children. But insofar as its close cousin formal acknowledgement is concerned, it works the other way, right? Father formally acknowledges his illegitimate child. That enables the child to inherit from the father, but it doesn't enable the father to inherit from the child. Okay, so that's one change in the law. Again, it's collateral law, filiation, not really successions, donations law, but that's one you might need to be aware of. Now, with respect to donations inter vivos, what's been changed? Well, we no longer have even arguably acceptance of donations inter vivos by